And welcome to today's webinar on the 2022 Privacy Survey Assessment Walkthrough. I am Leanne Woods, and I provide support to the Office of Privacy and Data Protection, and I also host for the Zoom sessions. There's just a few reminders before we get started. This webinar will be recorded and posted to the OPDP website. We will also provide a copy of the presentation after the webinar. Everyone has been muted to cut down on background noise. And please put any questions or comments that you have in the chat box, and we will be monitoring that. And now I will turn it over to Katy Ruckle.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Katy Ruckle, the state's Chief Privacy Officer, and I'm joined by Zach Hudgins, who is our Privacy and Data Protection Manager, and he's going to get into the substance of the survey, but I'm going to just do a few introductory remarks. So this is the third year that our office, under my leadership, has conducted the Privacy Assessment Survey. And if you could go to the next slide, Zach, I'm going to put in the chat as well where you can find the actual link to the survey and this guidance document that we're going through today. So it's actually on the OCIO website. So I'll drop that in the chat in just a minute. So this document has the introductions, why we're required to do the privacy assessment survey, a little bit about our office, and then parts of the survey questions, which you may notice align to the Washington State Agency privacy principles. Next page. So this is just the introduction with our RCW that talks about why we're required to do the survey. And then on the next page, it starts to get into some of the screenshots of the actual survey. So this document mainly contains the screenshots of the survey. And this document is able to be used when you are working with others in your agency to answer questions, to be able to see some of the logic of the questions and all of the available questions. Unfortunately, it's not completed in Adobe. It needs to be completed in the FormStack application, and that link is available on the OCIO website. So the one piece that I wanted to point out today on this introduction page is the fact that we have a metadata collection disclosure notice. We have realized that using the FormStack tool, it does actually collect latitude and longitude data. But what we have learned is that lat and long data is specific to your internet service provider. And so exact location data is only collected if you have a static IP address. Most people do not have a static IP address, but we wanted to call that out, especially in terms of being the Office of Privacy and Data Protection and wanting to be transparent about the data that the survey tool is collecting. So please go to the next page, and I'm going to turn it over to Zach to go through the actual survey.
Thank you very much, Katy. So I'm Zach Hudgins. I'm a privacy manager here in the Office of Privacy and Data Protection. I helped put together the report that was submitted to the legislature, and I'll help do that again this year. And so that's why I'm walking you through. The survey has about 9 sections. And I'll remind folks that this is not about a compliance process. This is about a program maturity and assessment process. We're simply trying to find out how the state's doing around privacy policies and programs, and we're trying to figure out how the state is handling data. Along these lines, also, it helps our office with resource planning. So keep those in mind as you answer these questions. And also another reminder that all of these answers are publicly disclosable. There are 9 sections to the document. The first one is, of course, just some simple agency information about who you are and who is filling the document out. So that's the first question. Do you keep data? Do you collect data? If you do not, and we've got about 10 or 15 agencies that don't collect any data, don't have data on anyone, then it jumps you to the end and you're done. You'll go to the conclusion page right away. So this is just the very beginning. The first section of the 9 is about what types of data you have. If you look through this list, things like financial information, social security numbers, driver's license numbers. If you handle those, you'll probably you'll recognize them pretty straightforwardly. And this is a select all that apply. If you do have used privacy impact assessments, that question expands in 1.4 there. And so we ask a little bit more about that. And there's a couple of places in the survey where if you answer in one way, it gives you logic and it expands to get a little bit more information.
Zach, your audio is kind of fading in and out a little bit. Maybe you can move the speaker closer to you.
Should I lean into the computer? That's sorry, everybody. I will maybe I'll speak a little bit louder and more clearly as well. The next section is around the privacy roles and staffing. This is basically who deals with the data, who deals with your privacy policy, who is responsible for answering questions. And so we've got two questions here. Who is responsible for privacy and who answers privacy questions? Sometimes there's a designated privacy program person, and sometimes someone with a different responsibility answers privacy questions. So if you do have someone, we'd like to know who that is so that we can contact them, make sure they have the resources available from our offices. And so that 2.2 expands to
Zach, your audio is not working.
How odd, since it was working a few minutes ago.
Okay, I can hear you now, but for some reason, when you speak for longer periods, it's fading in and out.
If I yell, you'll be able to hear me through the office walls that I'm in, just down the hall. Okay. I will keep going, I guess.
Yeah, do you have your phone?
I do.
Maybe, yeah, somebody suggested using the phone.
Okay, let me.
So I'm gonna pause here really quickly and then answer a look at some of the questions in the chat. So I think, so Morgan's asked, does this include personal data? And you're talking about for the first questions for PII, for personally identifiable information. Is that what you mean, Morgan?
Yes, that's what I mean. Personnel, files, personal data.
So
home addresses, that
personnel.
kind of stuff.
So just, yeah, so one of the first distinguishers on the first page is whether or not you collect PII of Washington residents. We don't apply the survey to just employee data. We're talking about PII of Washington residents, and that's explained on the first page.
Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
I have one more question. If your staff are also users of applications that you're collecting personal information on, in that situation, would that apply? So outside of their personnel records, if their personal identifying information is captured within web applications or in a database that is specific to our business, is that considered data stored under that first set of questions?
So it's really intended to apply to customers. So if the employees are customers, then that would be applicable. But if it's just being employed for being retained for employee business purposes, that's not what the survey is intended to capture. Okay. Because every state agency will have employee data. Okay, so for training and policies, this is not a new question. It's asking about whether or not you have formal policies that address privacy training. And if you, and also if you have specific trainings for more particularly sensitive information. So we know that some agencies have HIPAA covered data, so they have specific trainings regarding HIPAA. They may have other specific trainings. But I will actually note for 3.4, we are launching our own privacy basics training for state employees. And so this is trying to gauge awareness about that. And then if it's possible to, if you have an interest in launching that training. So Zach, can you go to the next page? So this is asking whether or not you're aware of it, and then whether or not you would be considering making it mandatory for your agency. We've already heard from some state agencies that plan to make it mandatory, but some may not know that it exists. And so that's where we're trying to gauge. We've just launched it, and we're still waiting for DES to make it available to all state agencies. So the training is complete, but it's actually going through some technical processes to make it available for all state agencies. And then I just saw another question. Zach, were you able to join by phone? Okay, I'll let you take over again. So if your agency completed, there's a question about getting previous previous answers, previous surveys. You can email the privacy inbox at privacy@watex.wa.gov, and we can pull the survey that your agency completed for 2020 and 2021 in case you need to see that if you don't have access to your agency's previously completed survey.
Okay, I'm back, I think. Can you hear me okay, Katie?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So transparency aligns very closely with our privacy principles. And so question 4 out of 9 is around your website privacy policies and your agency privacy policies. And then depending on how you answer these, they expand out, which is seen below. Both the website privacy policy information and how often or when it was last updated. And the same goes for expanding out around your external facing privacy notice for your agency. In question 5, section 5, it's about individual participation. This is about when an individual resident of Washington State or someone contacts you to either correct their information or get access to their information. About, do you allow that? How do you do that? And how do you have those processes in place? Section 6 is called accountability, and it's mostly about, are there any, have you had any incidents or have you had any issues with other of your vendors? Have you had any data incidents that you had to report? And so these questions are important to us, and they help us recognize what else needs to happen in our state organization around maturity levels. One thing to note in the accountability section is that we have a new question here around, so there's the new question, 6.6 around metrics. Our colleague Matt King has done a whole webinar metrics, and so if you do have metrics around your privacy program, that's what this question is targeted at. Just go back around the accountability section again to mention that as you answer these questions, they expand outwards. The next section is around third party. This is around data sharing, third party management, data publishing. So who do you share information with? Who do you get information from? Do you sell information on any personal information as well? And so it's helpful to track these items, again, around maturity of privacy programs and compliance, not so much compliance, but again, just to see how we're doing in the state along our relationship management with third parties who have data. So there are 7 pieces of section 7. So number 8 of 9 is around our data handling. So that inventory, retention, destruction. And again, this is a question of how do you handle the data that you do have in your stewardship at your agency? Has your agency completed data mapping and inventory? When was the last inventory done? How do you delete data? What's your retention schedule? That sort of a thing. Section 9 has been reworked a little bit, and it is about future planning. It has been simplified a little bit to help us with the information that we get. So this is about how important privacy is to your agency, whether you've got new awareness, the importance has increased over time, and it helps us understand your relationship with our Office of Privacy and Data Protection, and also helps us with any ideas for future resources. You can find all the resources that our office does through these links. We do regular webinars. We put together help with model policies for agencies, and we certainly answer questions all year round that we're happy to take from the community broadly. Both regular folks, residents of Washington State, and state agencies we work with, and local governments. That's what I do a lot of. So if you've got any questions for us, if you think that we should be focusing on a certain topic, if you have questions for us, this is a great place to put that as well as into section 9. Finally, we've got a conclusion, and I'll make mention, if you try and submit without filling in one of the sections, all of the asterisk sections or the individual questions, when you submit, if you have not filled them out, it will take you back to those unfilled out questions. So you have to have a completed survey before it will submit. Once you do submit a completed survey, you will get a copy via PDF, and we can also provide you with a copy of the survey as well if you need it. But that way you get to see what your answers were, and you get to see what you're using to put together the final report. With that, I apologize for the audio, but I'm happy to have Katie and I try and answer any of your questions.
Thanks, Zach. So there's one question that I saw from Nicole about legal definitions. So let's see, scroll up here. So link to some legal definitions on biometrics, geolocation, and facial recognition templates. We can send you, we can include those links, not in this year's survey because the survey is already created and active. There are a couple links in there. But one thing that I want to caution you is that if you think you have anything that might meet these definitions, I would probably be indicating that you collect this data, because I am concerned about getting too nuanced in terms of what you think being only a legal definition for what a biometric is versus whether you are collecting biometrics, because the point of the survey is to try and help agencies understand what they're collecting. So if you're trying to decide this counts or this doesn't count, then you might be trying to get too narrow of a definition and not really recognizing the type of data you might have. Because if you have things like thumbprints or you know, different types of DNA records and those types of things that can be biometrics, then you probably should be thinking about the ways that you want to protect that data. So that's the whole point, to ask the question of, do you collect these types of information, to also get an idea about what your agency has. And so there are definitions that I can send the RCWs. I'm happy to do that for the facial recognition law and biometrics. And there is some GPS definitions, but if you think you're collecting it, I would dig a little bit deeper into that to see whether or not you really want to say, well, this doesn't count because it doesn't meet the legal definition. So there's one exception to that I will say for the facial templates, is that the biometrics that we use to unlock our phones, that is actually excluded from the definition of facial biometrics. But I have seen many agencies address that by saying, we don't collect this information, and we only use, the only time we do use facial templates is for people to unlike their own devices. And so that way you're at least acknowledging that there's some sort of use there. So, but I'll send the RCWs. Other questions? Did we miss another one? Oh, looks like, is Matt getting some? Yeah, Matt's getting the facial rec and biometric in there. So Hannah wants to know, so we sometimes have passport information for our contracted trade specialists that we use when making arrangements for trade missions. The contractors are not customers. So this is an